And you're welcome back to the Healthy Morning Show right here on HSTV, where day in and day out we serve you with great content, political side and also health side as well, so we can stay alive every time of the day. So now we have Dr. Kelvin Owusu here in the studios with us, where we're going to talk about hernia, what we should know about hernia, what causes it and how to prevent it in the first place. He is the medical director for Violet Medical Center, and he's here to educate us more on that. So you don't want to miss out on all the things he's going to say. Don't forget to send your contributions on our social media platforms. We're active on Facebook at HSTVLIVEGH. We're doing this with you, so let's get interactive. Any contribution or any question at all you have for Doctor, he's here to answer you. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Very well, very well.
Okay, I like you're bringing in positive vibes already, and I like that. Yeah,
that's the best we can do.
Of course, definitely. So let's get right into it. So talking about hernia, what exactly is hernia? Give us an overview of what hernia is.
All right, so generally when we say hernia, we are talking about organs that have moved beyond their boundaries.
Okay.
So any organ, internal organ that moves beyond the stipulated area where it's supposed to position itself is a hernia. So you can have hernia of the brainstem, when it comes down down into the spinal cord area. You can have a hernia of the stomach through the diaphragm into the chest. You can have hernias in all sorts of areas. But loosely, when we just use hernia without any specific qualification, it typically refers to abdominal organs, usually the intestine, which protrudes out of the boundary into the other areas.
Okay.
So we have, by that description, we have different types of hernias. I'm sure we'll get into it, but there are so many different types of hernias. But typically, depending on whether it's a man or woman, there are some that are more peculiar to men and others that are more peculiar to women. So generally, that's what a hernia is.
Okay, and what brings it about in the first place? What causes one to get hernia?
All right, so as I said, when we use it loosely, you're referring to the abdominal organ, the intestine that has moved out. And typically, what would cause the hernia to develop is increased intra-abdominal pressure. So the easiest way to understand intra-abdominal pressure is when you are lifting up something, or no, when you have constipation. Yes, let's use that one. And you are sitting on the loo and you are trying to poop. You see how you are energetically forcing things out that are refusing to come out. So when you do that, the abdominal muscles will tense to try and increase the pressure to push it out. So any situation that causes that to happen consistently can predispose you to developing a hernia.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, for instance, if somebody has it's always getting chronically constipated, that can give you a hernia.
Okay.
You see, so you don't want to be chronically constipated. That's why you have to poop at least once every day. It's doctor's orders. You have to poop every day to avoid constipation because it could lead to a hernia. On the opposite side, diarrhea can also cause a hernia, because sometimes, and when you have diarrhea and there's nothing in there, but you are still forcing things out, you have to strain and try to push whatever is not there out. That can also give you a hernia if it happens for a long time. In women, particularly, pregnancy is a risk factor. You see, because you have something heavy, growing inside your abdomen, and that heaviness would increase the pressure in the abdomen and push the intestine either up or down, and that can increase the risk of developing a hernia.
Okay.
So there are so many things, but generally speaking, any situation that causes you to consistently have raised intra-abdominal pressure can give you a hernia.
Oh, okay. Quite interesting. So, what are the symptoms? How are we going to determine that you're about to develop a hernia?
So let's put it this way. Men are predisposed to hernias, particularly the type called inguinal hernia, which is the hernia that develops in the groin.
Okay.
So, and this is because as babies, or as embryos, when the egg and the sperm fuse and you begin your development inside your mother's womb, the testis actually develops in the abdomen. And after about the 3rd month of development, it begins to descend.
Okay.
So now that descent into the scrotum creates a path. It creates a path inside the abdomen where abdominal content there, like the intestine, can pass in the future. So every man is pretty much at risk of developing a hernia. So now this risk is then actualized when you begin to do the things I mentioned. So if assuming you go to the gym, start lifting weights, and you don't wear the appropriate gear, or you're a manual worker, a mason, or a carpenter carrying heavy loads, all this will put you at risk. So now some of the first things you begin to notice would be a bulge in the groin. And this bulge in the beginning, it will come only when you are lifting things, or only when you are straining. you know, or when you wake up in the morning, you stand up, you're walking around, and just as you are getting active, you see a small bulge in the groin. So groin is where the thigh meets the abdomen. So that's area, that triangle down there. Now this swelling, when you lie flat or when you put down whatever you're carrying, it goes back, it reduces. Okay. You know, so that is the classic presentation or the classic symptom of a hernia. Sometimes it might be painful, most times it's not painful. Okay. And interestingly, because most of the time it's not painful, that's why most people never, you know, bother to go to the hospital to go and have it looked at. But the reality is that over time, it can become a problem. Okay. You see, because the hernia or the hole where the hernia is coming through will keep getting bigger so long as you are continuing to engage in whatever activity you're engaging in. Okay. So say you're a manual worker, for instance, and you are lifting the heavy things, the bulge begins, a small bulge. Over time, it keeps getting bigger, and the hernia or the intestine would end up in your scrotum.
Okay, so we have a picture displayed on the screen right there. So is that a typical example of what it looks like?
So this looks like a picture of the testes as it's descending into the scrotum. Okay. So you can see those two bluish things over there. Yeah. Yes. So you can see that the testes are descending gradually into the scrotum. So that part where the testes are passing through, that is the potential space that a hernia can also pass through. Oh. Okay. So this is what puts all men at risk of developing a hernia. You know. So once you're a man, you have gone through this. You know, the testes, like I said, it starts all the way high up around where the kidneys are located, which is quite high up in the abdomen, and it comes all the way down from there into the scrotum. So that part is a potential. When we say potential space, we mean that it's a space that even though it's closed, with consistent force, it can open up. Okay. So that's why the hernia is more common. That particular hernia is more common in men. You know, so when it goes into the scrotum, it means that the hernia can also pass along that same path and enter the scrotum. So if you don't do anything about it when you were small, it's going to get bigger and it's going to drop lower until it gets into the scrotum. And when it gets into the scrotum, obviously it means that it's going to affect your testes. Yeah. You know, because there's a reason why the testes are hanging outside, because it needs a lower temperature. Now, if you have your intestine sitting inside your testicle, but it's sitting beside your testicle, it's going to increase the temperature and cause you problems. So we don't want it to get there. But because most of the time it doesn't have any pain, people just ignore it until it gets extremely big or until it gets trapped. You know, because the intestine is still functional. So when you eat, the food will go to the stomach, enter the intestine, and then go all the way into the testicles before it comes back out, because right now that's where your intestines have reached. It shouldn't be so. Now, there may be situations where you can't have an obstruction because the ring through which the intestine has passed can cut off the blood supply of the intestine, the portion of the intestine that has gone into through that ring. And that can result in a situation called strangulation. Wow. Yes, similar to somebody choking your neck, you know. So the blood flow or the cessation of blood flow into the intestine causes excruciating pain. And that's a medical emergency because the intestine is dying because it's not getting blood. So it's dying. If you're not able to rush to the hospital, or let's assume that you get to the hospital and they're not able to do what they need to do quickly, you could die. You know.
Okay, so right here we have on the screens, is it something like that?
Exactly. So now you see the ring, there's a ring through which the intestine has passed to enter into the scrotum area. So that ring can cut the blood supply. And when that happens, the portion of the intestine that is inside the you know, that space begins to die. Okay. And that's not a situation where we don't want you to get to that point at all. But if you do get to a point like that, you need to get to the hospital immediately. And this is cause for immediate surgery, you see. So now, whilst it was not painful or whilst it was small, that's actually the best time to repair it. Okay. You know, but if you ignore it and it gets to this point, you really don't have the luxury of time.
But when it gets to this point, how is someone going to tell that
pain? I mean, this is the pain is significant. It's very, very painful. You know, I mean, I can't describe the pain to you enough. It's very painful. So that's number one, pain. Then number two, because the portion of the intestine is dying, when you eat, the food cannot pass there because the intestine is made up of muscles, and it's the muscles that will contract and move the food along. Okay. So now because that portion is dying, your food that you eat will not be able to go through. So then you begin to vomit. Oh, okay. You know, so whatever you eat, you're going to vomit. You know, but then the question is, the pain will not even allow you to eat in the first place. But should you even manage to eat, you know, it will come back out because if it can't, the intestine does not store food. It moves food along. So if I'm moving the food and I hit a blockade, I can't go for it. I'll bring it back out, and so you begin to vomit. You see, so those are the signs of a strangulated hernia. Pain, vomiting, and sometimes you can also have abdominal distension. The abdomen begins to get bigger, you know, and bloating. I mean, it's not something to be played with. This is actually fatal if not treated. You see, because if that portion dies inside your abdomen or inside the scrotum, it begins to release toxins, which would now cause a generalized a generalized problem. You know, so whereas it started with a local small swelling, now it has spread throughout the blood, and you will die.
Wow.
So it's not something that you want to be playing with at all.
Okay, so let's talk about more of the other types of hernias we have.
So I mean, so the inguinal hernia is more common in men. In fact, there are 8 times more common in men as in women, but women also do get inguinal hernia. However, women are more likely to get a femoral hernia, which is a similar dynamics, but because they don't have a testis that has created a path through the groin, they tend to develop a different kind of hernia, almost in the same area, but it's a little, I mean, it's a bit technical, but that's called a femoral hernia. Okay. And the interesting thing is that the femoral hernia has a higher risk of complication. You see, because the man has a scrotum which can actually accommodate some amount of intestine. You see, the woman does not have any such pouch to accommodate anything. So the slightest thing that goes through there will end you up in hospital. You know, so maybe that is why women don't have a more negative outcome from hernias. I don't know if you get what I mean. Because the smallest bit of intestine that goes through that hole in the woman will be painful enough to bring it to the hospital. So they get attended to quickly. But for the man, the scrotum has the capacity to actually expand and accommodate, you know, a lot of intestine. So it takes a while for most men. I mean, they'll continue doing their work until it's unbearable. So that's the femoral hernia, which is more common in women than it is in men. Then we have other types of hernia. In fact, one of the most common hernias is an umbilical hernia. Almost every child has some of that at some point in their lives. So you see somebody with a navel, which is the belly button, which is very big. So that's actually a hernia. Yes, and it's very common in children, in babies actually. But for most babies, as they grow older, it gets smaller and eventually closes up. You know, I dare say half the people in this room probably had an umbilical hernia when they were babies. It's because of the connection of the, you know, from the mother, the blood vessels connect to the baby through the umbilicals or the belly button. You know, so when the baby is delivered and they cut it, there always tends to be some loose room that some intestine can come in there. But as you grow older, it closes up by itself. But unfortunately, not everybody has the luxury of their own closing naturally. So sometimes it stays open for a long time and they may require surgery to close it up. You know, so that's the umbilical hernia. Then we also have incisional hernias. So once you've had an operation before, there is especially an operation where the abdomen was opened up. So operations like cesarean section, appendix operations, any operation where the abdomen was open. You know, when sometimes the repair, or if you had an episode of an infection during the healing, you can be at risk of developing a hernia through where the cut was made. So that's an incisional hernia. Then there is one other hernia where I mentioned earlier, where the stomach, you know, the stomach is sitting right under the diaphragm. If you remember your biology or your general science, the diaphragm separates the chest from the stomach, so that there's hardly any interaction between your lungs or your heart and the stomach and the other parts of the abdomen. Now, sometimes the portion where the esophagus enters the stomach, which is where the diaphragm also has an opening. You know, so there's an opening in the diaphragm for the esophagus, which is the connection from your mouth to pass through and enter the stomach. Sometimes the stomach or the esophagus can pull the stomach up a bit. You know, such that the stomach is no longer inside the abdomen. You know, now I'm using medical terms, but I mean we all know these things. So I'm sure many people call they look at this place and they say my stomach. It's not your stomach. So maybe we should back it up a bit.
Okay, so we have a picture displayed on the screen right there.
Yes. So this is still showing the inguinal hernia we spoke about from the side view. So you can see the intestine getting into the scrotal sac. So it's very close to the testes in that image. So this is a side view of what we had seen earlier.
For the inguinal
hernia. This is what I'm saying, that is more common in men, about 8 times more common in men than in women.
Okay. Quite interesting. So you were talking about the stomach?
Yes, so when the stomach now moves up into the chest, then you have a type of hernia called a hiatus hernia. Now, this kind of hernia, or rather, the diaphragm sort of keeps the stomach closed, so that when you eat, food doesn't come back into your esophagus, right? Yeah, okay. Or when you lie down, food doesn't come back into your esophagus. So when the stomach now shifts up like that, it means that the diaphragm is no longer able to close the stomach. So now you begin to have reflux.
Okay.
So when you lie down, or when you eat and you lie down, the food begins to come up into your chest, into your throat, and you feel burning, because there's a lot of acid in the stomach. Yeah. So people with hiatal hernias tend to have acid reflux. Okay. So they have a lot of pain, discomfort, especially when they finish eating and they lie down flat. They go to hospital several times. They are treated for ulcer. They are treated for this. And until a scan or a CT scan or MRI is done before it's picked up that apparently it's a hiatal hernia. Yeah. It's quite difficult to treat, but it is treatable. Sometimes in the extreme cases, they may require surgery to try and push the stomach back down and close the opening, because sometimes the opening has become a bit too big. So it is quite a distressing situation to find yourself in. But like I said, the causes still remain about the same for all the hernias. Once you keep engaging in things that would raise your intra-abdominal pressure, it could end you up with abdominal organs moving into places where they are not supposed to go. So there's a technique that everybody, we all need to learn how to lift heavy things, how to handle heavy things for that matter. If you don't just wake up one morning and decide to go and lift a 25-kilo thing just because you can, or just because it's part of your work. You need to learn the appropriate technique, and preferably even wear appropriate gear. There's this belt that especially the weightlifters would wear when they are lifting heavy weight. It actually helps. If your line of work requires you to be lifting heavy weights, it's good that you find a belt that is adapted to the particular work you are doing and then put it on. Unfortunately, in my dealings, I have dealt with a lot of people, especially in factory settings and other areas, and they will tell you that when I wear the gear, I don't feel comfortable. But now the question I would ask is, so are you rather comfortable with the hernia dangling between your legs? Is that a better option?
Yeah.
Because the gear is there to minimize. You see, because even the gear will not necessarily prevent you from developing the hernia, but it will minimize the risk. Yeah. You see, because once you are putting your body through unnatural positions or unnatural stress, you need to make sure that you are also protecting the body, because we really have only one body.
Yeah, definitely.
So you need to protect it so that it will last you your lifetime. Otherwise, before long, things are falling apart, and who do you blame? It's yourself. In as much as we are out there, hustling for the money, we need to make sure that we are also trying our best not to endanger ourselves. Yeah. You see, it's very, very important. And hernia is indeed some of the reasons why people would go to hospital multiple times. And the reality too is that there are a lot of quacks. This one I'm not going to mince words, who are out there selling so-called medication to cure hernia. Okay. Take it from me, there is no medication. I repeat, there is absolutely no medication that you can take to cure a hernia.
There is no medication.
There is no medication. It hasn't been developed yet. Maybe they are now going to develop it, but it hasn't been developed yet.
So those people we see selling all this.
There is no medicine.
Oh, okay.
There is no medication. Listen to what I've already said. How are you going to take medicine by mouth that will go into your scrotum and then pull back the intestine and then close the space and prevent the hernia from happening? It doesn't even make sense. You see?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Because there's something, a part of your intestine has entered the space, and you are taking medicine, and you want the medicine to do what?
To pull it back.
It's not possible.
It's not possible. Yeah.
So and this is real. It sounds funny, but it's really happening. Yeah. People, and these medications that they are selling, it's not cheap. So people go around and they buy all this medication, and they have other people who swear that the medication has cured them, and you waste all your money on this medication. Then eventually you get the strangulation and come to hospital, and you don't have money to pay for the surgery that will actually now save your life. Yeah. It's a real situation that's, I wish we didn't have to deal with, but unfortunately we are dealing with it. It's a major problem. So I'm repeating, there's no medication that you take that will dissolve the hernia. It's not possible.
Oh, okay.
So don't waste your time. If you have any swelling in your groin or any part of your abdomen that you don't understand what's happening, go to the hospital and get proper education on what you need to do about it. If there's a need for surgery, then there is a need for surgery, because surgery is the only way that will close the space and prevent a further development. But having said that, and again, you hear this too, I repaired my surgery, and I repaired my hernia, it has come back. Well, here's the reality. If you repair the hernia and you go back to doing the things that cause the hernia, guess what? It will come back. You see, it's not a one fix for all of life. If you fix it today and tomorrow you go back to engaging in those same things, the heavy lifting with the poor positioning and poor pushing and lack of proper gear, you will end up developing a hernia again. And remember that you have two, I mean, for lack of a better description, you have two groins. You know, there's a left side and there's a right side. So if you have a hernia on the right and you fix the hernia on the right, you could develop a hernia on the left as well.
Oh, okay.
You see, so I mean, it is what it is. You need to listen to the counsel and either you are going to minimize the exposure to the heavy lifting if you can. If you cannot, then wear the appropriate gear so that you minimize the risk. But having said that, men are also predisposed to hernia as they grow older due to prostate enlargement.
Okay.
So when your prostate, and take this, all men, I repeat, all men will have their prostates get bigger as they grow older.
Okay.
However, not all men will have symptoms of prostate enlargement. I'm stressing on this because now there are a lot of places where they are doing scans and various things. So if you go and do a scan and the scan says your prostate is enlarged, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a problem with your prostate. It's part of the aging process for men, you know. But it doesn't also mean that you should ignore it. Do get a proper checkup so that if there's a need to do anything, then you fix it. But once the prostate enlarges and it begins to affect your ability to urinate, you know, because when the prostate gland, this is your urethra. The urethra is where your urine comes from. The urethra passes through the prostate gland. Okay. So when the prostate gland enlarges, it's going to compress the urethra. So you might struggle to urinate. You know, so some men, when they go to pee, the urine does not even come. They have to strain. Remember, we've already mentioned that straining can cause you to develop a hernia. So as you continue to strain, you could end up with a hernia. Okay. You know. So now, if you come in with a hernia, we need to make sure that hernia is not because your prostate has enlarged. Because if we fix the hernia and the prostate is still causing problems, you will develop another hernia. Okay. So we need to fix the prostate first, and then we repair the hernia. Okay. That way, we know that the hernia is not going to recur as a result of your prostate enlargement. Similar thing occurs in women as well. Sometimes when you have a fibroid, and the fibroid is obviously fibroid will increase the pressure in your eyes, will increase the weight. So if the fibroid is large enough, it can cause you to develop a hernia. You know, so once again, if we fix the hernia without fixing the fibroid,
it's going to come back.
It's going to come back. So whatever is causing the hernia needs to be addressed. So if the hernia is as a result of the kind of work you are doing, you have two choices. You either stop and find a new job, or you find gear to help you manage the load better. If it's an ill head, if it's a fibroid or prostate, we need to deal with that as well. So whatever is causing it, we need to address that before we even deal with the hernia itself.
Okay, now let's talk about some of the jobs these people find themselves in. What are some of the jobs that would you say it could cause one to develop a hernia?
Well, the first one that comes to mind, well, there are two anyway. Sportsmen would do develop hernia because, I mean, they lift weights to build their muscles and they're engaging in a lot of physical activity, so they could end up with a hernia. So that's one side. And then also bodybuilders or people who frequent the gym can also develop hernia. So they are all in one category. Then we have manual workers, you know, like masons, head porters, you know, carpenters. All these people are at risk of hernia because of the line of work they do, the heavy lifting that they are always engaging in. So those are, and also heavy truck drivers to an extent can also develop hernias because sometimes, especially the trucks that don't have the power steering, you know, whenever you're turning the steer, you need to engage all your abdominal muscles, so you can develop a hernia over time. You know, so all these people, all these lines of work can put you at risk of developing hernias. Okay,
but normally we hear that we are supposed to go to the gym to exercise and all that. So if I'm not going to the gym, how am I supposed to, you know, go to the gym and also prevent me from getting hernia?
Well, I mean, exercise. Okay, so you don't. Well, let me put it this way. You need to exercise, yes, but you also need to make sure that you are putting on the right gear. And then secondly, you need to also make sure that you are exercising according to your ability or your capabilities. Okay. You know, so you don't get to the gym day one and go and start lifting 25 kgs. You know, you start from 2 kg or 5 kg and then build capacity. And then at some point, you need to put on the various belts or the various protection to keep to prevent the abdomen from or your abdominal organs from descending too much when you strain.
Okay.
You know, so appropriate gear is important. That's one of the key ways of preventing unnecessary complications.
Okay, okay, quite interesting. So now let's look at children. How would you say a child yet to be born can develop a hernia?
Oh yes, I mean
How?
the hernia does not respect age. To be honest, I mean at any age you can develop a hernia. I mean I already mentioned the more common one in the children, the umbilical hernia. You know, so almost all children will be born with some form of umbilical hernia. But as they grow older, some of them will close within a few months. Some of them will take a couple of years before they will close. But eventually, most of the children it will close. So usually, if a child has an umbilical hernia, I mean, the old people will tell you to tie a coin on the belly button. I really don't think that's the best approach, because you can't end up causing problems with that as well, and we have seen a few, you know. So we wouldn't necessarily encourage you to apply any metal, because if the metal is not even properly clean, the child's skin is very sensitive. It can pick up some things, and you end up with an infection. You know, so we don't typically encourage that. Rather, get a proper evaluation when you go for child welfare, or when you go for postnatal, or whichever encounter you have when you go for weighing, you know, because for the first year they are going for weighing almost every so often. Let the health personnel attend to the child and then see what's going on. If there's a need for surgery, they will recommend the surgery, but most of the time there's really no need for surgery. You know, sometimes some of the children are born with various defects in the various places which predispose them to developing a hernia. You know, so yes, the hernias do occur in children as well.
Oh, okay. Now, you were talking about the surgery and all that. I want us to touch more on the surgery and the surgical processes you use to treat hernia. Let's talk about that as well. So
remember that the reason why the hernia has occurred is because there's an abnormal opening in a certain place that is allowing the abdominal content to come out. You know, so the principle is very simple. We go in, we push whatever is not there back into where it's supposed to be, and then we close the opening. So that's the principle. That's all.
Okay.
So basically, we go there. If it's intestine that has come out, push it back in, and then close the space so that it doesn't come out again.
Okay.
You know. Now there are different techniques, and obviously the various techniques will determine the cost. So there are different techniques and different cost implications. Depending on which technique is suitable for you, then the appropriate thing will be done. But you see, typically when you come on there and you talk about these things, you get. I mean, I'm sure the people will send messages, and what should I do? You need to get evaluated. What worked for Kofi will not work for Amma.
Okay.
Because Kofi's hernia was small. Amma's hernia is like my head. So we need to assess you as an individual.
Yeah.
What are your risk factors? In other words, what caused you to develop the hernia? You know, and which repair mechanism would favor you? Because depending on the location of the hernia, one technique might be preferred over another technique. You know, so you cannot sit down and say because Amma did her surgery 10 years ago and after 10 years it has come back, it means surgery is not good, so I'm going to buy medicine. No, everybody is different. Maybe Amma was a head porter who was carrying load, had the hernia was repaired, and still went back to carrying the load without the appropriate gear and developed the hernia again. You see, so or maybe Amma has given birth to three, 4 children and developed a hernia afterwards. You have not even given birth to anybody, so how are you comparing the two situations?
Yeah.
So don't use somebody's experience to judge your outcome. You need to go in for an evaluation so that you see what can be done for you. But the bottom line is you cannot be carrying your hernia walking around. Hernia is not a badge of honor. Once there's a hernia, it means that something is abnormal. Don't wait for the thing to become painful before you report, because when it becomes painful, it becomes a bit more difficult. It's more difficult to treat.
Okay.
You see, and the risk of post-surgical complications are higher. You see, so once you've seen it, report and let's deal with it. You see, because you actually, if it's about cost, you actually have time. So if you came in with a small hernia, they will tell you that, okay, so this is what we need to do. This is the cost.
Yeah.
You can go and actually prepare and then come back. But if the hernia becomes painful and is strangulated, there's no time. Yeah. You see, and it tends to be more expensive to deal with the emergencies than if you actually went in earlier to treat it when it was not painful. So my advice is you need to get evaluated now and begin to plan towards getting that surgery done.
Okay.
Because you end up spending less money and your recovery will be faster. You know, but now that I mentioned recovery, let me touch on that as well. Okay. So when you do a hernia surgery, ideally, up to about 6 months, you shouldn't actually be lifting any heavy weight.
Okay.
Ideal. But obviously 6 months is a long time. So we said at least minimum 6 weeks, no heavy lifting. You need to allow the skin to heal properly. And even when you do return to active work, you need to take it easy, or take it easier than you were doing before. Allow proper wound healing, proper recovery, so that the place is not disturbed by increasing heavy weight. You see, so after surgery, constipation, all those things, we don't want them in your life at all. So as much as possible, you need to eat a lot more fruits and vegetables, because they have a lot of fiber, which would tend to absorb water and make your stool soft. You know, so and this one, especially the women. Typically, women don't like to poop. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just a habit or it's hormonal or something. You know, but when you have a hernia, you need to make an effort to poop at least once a day, so that you don't. Because once you leave, I mean, it's a bit graphic, but once you leave poop in the rectum, the body will continue to draw water from it for as long as it stays there. So if you delay pooping, it gets harder and harder.
Okay.
You know, so you don't want that at all, especially after you've had surgery for hernia. You don't want constipation at all. You know, so whatever you need to do, fruits, vegetables. I mean, mango is a very good, you know, good medication for that. So, so you need to be eating all those things regularly, so that your bowels can be moving freely, and make it a habit of sitting on the potty every morning. You know, to condition your mind to actually, you know, begin to associate that as part of your morning routine. It's very important, you know.
Okay. Okay. So, is there any other final advice you'd like to give to the viewers?
Well, I mean, as it is with health, I mean, what I keep saying is that your health is really your responsibility.
Of course, yeah.
You know, oftentimes we postpone our health needs to a so-called better time, you know, to deal with it.
Yeah.
But that better time never really comes.
Yeah.
You know, and so it gets more and more difficult, because the situation that started as a small thing will begin to multiply. And now, whereas you could have sorted it out with, let's say, 500 Ghana cedis, now it becomes thousands. So you are still waiting for some cash to go and resolve it. The next time you go, it has gone up. You know, so what I'll say is that take responsibility. Go get that evaluation now, and then at least see what you're up against. Because for all you know, it might not even be a hernia. It might be something more sinister. Yeah. And we don't want something like that happening. You know, because there are so many people who die, and then they say that, oh, but nani huyo. But unfortunately, nani huye, because he or she will not have just dropped dead. So taking care of ourselves is our responsibility, and we need to make it a part of our annual routine. Everybody needs to go to the hospital at least once a year. Just go and get a routine checkup, see if everything is fine, and then deal with whatever findings come out as a result of that checkup. Okay.
So I'm aware there's a free screening of hernia happening.
Yes. So there is. We actually ended it, but because of this this morning we have extended it a little. Okay. So yes, you can actually come to our facility in Kwabinya on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week. Okay. And then we would assess you and then see what it is that is affecting you, and then help you deal with the financial aspects as well, so that we can intervene. Because hey, I mean, we all need help every now and then.
Yeah, definitely. So before we wrap up, I'd like you to give out your contact details in case they want to contact you, where they should locate you as well.
Okay, so I'm active on social media. You can find me at Kelvin, also MD, on all social media channels, and the clinic page as well as Violet Medical on all social media channels. And the number you can call is, just a minute. The number you can call is 054 059 9383. So let me repeat that: 054 059 9383. So you can call that number, and they'll give you the information and show you the direction as well. You can come over.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Kelvin Owusu. So we were talking about hernia with Dr. Kelvin Owusu, who is the medical director for Violet Medical Center. And as he said, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, there's a free screening of hernia happening right at his place. So go there and also get yourself checked. Let's keep ourselves safe wherever we are. And at this point, we're wrapping up these segments, and James is going to come in soon with info. Keep watching Healthy Morning. We'll be right back.